Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We may be looking at a major hurricane striking the U.S. mainland within the next 48 hours. As we come on the air, here's what forecasters are watching. What is right now Tropical Storm Helene is organizing and gaining strength, likely to reach hurricane status by tomorrow before making landfall in Florida sometime Thursday evening, potentially as a Category 3 hurricane. Helene forecasted to bring drenching rains and storm surge as high as 15 feet. Hurricane and storm surge alerts are already posted along the entire west coast of Florida, and residents are being urged to finish their preparations. We'll show you some of those preparations in a moment, but first we turn to Bill Cairns for the latest storm track. And Bill, how does it all time out?
Lester, 48 hours from now, we expect a major hurricane landfall with an impressive storm surge, dangerous winds, and, of course, all the rain that's going to come with it. The storm is still organizing. Right now, it's just a tropical storm. By tomorrow morning, near Cancun, possibly a Category 1 hurricane. Then it's over very warm water for about 36 hours. That's when we could have rapid intensification. That's when the Hurricane Center has it paralleling the west coast of Florida on Thursday and making landfall about 9 p.m. somewhere south of Tallahassee. Then Friday, traveling up through Georgia and raining itself out in the southern Appalachians. As far as the storm goes, don't focus on the cone. This storm is huge. It's about 400-mile wide tropical storm force winds well away from the center. We're going to have intense impacts, and also we're going to have storm surge problems, as you mentioned, up to 15 feet.
All right, Bill, thanks very much. Marissa Parra is in Tampa for us tonight. Marissa, a state of emergency is in effect there and in most of Florida, in fact.
Lester, that's right, and that is why we are seeing preparations days ahead of landfall. Right next to me, on the right of me, this is an almost 10-foot barrier. It's called an aqua fence, and this is what is expected to protect Tampa General Hospital on the other side of the fence from the Tampa Bay, just feet away from us. Now, where we are in Tampa, this is one of the counties, one of the at least 61 counties that has declared a state of emergency. That is most of the state of Florida. And as Bill just pointed out, the massive size of this storm, remember, it's not just those in the direct path. The biggest threat is often going to be the flooding and the storm surge, and this is why we are already seeing long lines at those sandbag distribution centers, at the gas station, school closures across the state. The message here, Lester, tonight is clear. Prepare now while you can.
This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. It's that time of year again. It's man-made hurricane season, where hurricane after hurricane after hurricane starts to strike states like Florida and Texas. And we're seeing more and more bizarre behaviors when it comes to these hurricanes, which is something that people need to keep an eye on. Most people think, obviously, that all of these hurricanes, tornadoes, etc., earthquakes are all natural occurring events. They refuse to believe that the government has the patents and the capability to do these things. But all of us obviously know better. We all know about HAARP. We know about Tesla's earthquake machine. We know about geoengineering and the chemical trails of aluminum and barium that are dumped on us daily and what they're able to do with those things. But I think even people who know some of these things still like to believe that some events are actually naturally occurring. And what we have to do when we see stories like this, without speculating too much, is look at what they're showing us. Because when they show us weather patterns that are not normal, you could bet your bottom dollar that it's a man-made storm. Now, if you notice, there were quite a few anomalies in that news clip that aired on national news on NBC propaganda television. You may have noticed that suddenly we're seeing hurricane patterns and storm patterns going west. Wasn't it always that every single hurricane would flow up from the south? It would flow northeast and tail off into the ocean. You ever seen a hurricane? How often does this happen, where a hurricane comes up through Florida, makes a turn towards Georgia and Tennessee, and parks itself in St. Louis? Well, that's not normal. In fact, that defies what they tell us is actual science. So we start with the pattern of the storm, and we could all look at that and say, yeah, that's not what we normally see. The other thing is where this storm is hitting. They're telling us that it's 400 miles wide. How often do you see a hurricane literally go coast to coast across Florida? Not very often. Now, they say on average most hurricanes can stretch about 300 miles wide. This one stretching 400 miles wide. And of course, it's very clear that it seems like they've been targeting the specific Gulf Coast of Florida most recently over the last couple of years. Now, for people out there that don't understand and say to themselves, well, why would they do this? Well, look at how we view sheep or cattle on a ranch or a farm, right? You know how you herd them and you move them around to certain spots and you get a sheepdog and you move your whole flock of animals that way, right? Your sheep herder will move the sheep. You know how that works, right? You ever seen that? You ever seen just video clips or TV shows where they show you a bull ranch and how the bulls are getting moved around from cage to cage or fence to fence or yard to yard? Well, that's exactly how these people view all of us. In fact, their books tell us that's how they view us. They literally call us cattle in their books, and they're moving people around like cattle. They're wiping out their homes. They're blaming it on the weather. And conveniently, Florida, which was always a state that actually went back and forth, it was a conservative to Democrat. I'd say it was never just this specific Republican state that it's become. How convenient that it's suddenly a Republican state where many Christian conservatives are heading down there and they're having their homes destroyed year after year after year without getting suspicious about it. Because, of course, these are things they refuse to learn because they've been told that we can't control Mother Nature, right? They've had these little bullet points beaten into their head about the weather. So they've been herded down to Florida. And now, conveniently, this same rogue government that wants everybody to become a communist globalist is targeting a state that's filled with conservative Christians, right? Targeting it with weaponized weather. Now, the other thing to note is on these news stations, have you ever seen this before? Power outage forecasts? I mean, this might not be the first time they've ever done it. I can't recall seeing this before, especially before a storm even hits. They're literally telling you that there's going to be widespread power outages pretty much through half of Florida, all of Georgia, and then all the way into the Carolinas, and even likely in Tennessee and Missouri. I mean, this is like not normal. They do not normally give you a power outage forecast. What they normally do is after a storm hits, they'll come out and they'll tell you, right? They'll say, well, power's out here, power's out there. We've got reports that half the county of this county has no power as of now, could not have power possibly for days. You never hear that, hey, guess what? You can count on your power very, very, very likely being out for an extended period of time. In fact, we don't even know if the storm would dissipate, but we're going to tell you right now there's going to be widespread power outages, which tells us, again, they show us these things ahead of time, just like nobody predicts the weather they tell us, right? You can't predict Mother Nature. Like I just said, they beat that into people's heads. Then how do they constantly show us where these storms are headed ahead of time? They constantly seem to show us these things. Right? Oh, right, because they have radar, not because they're the ones controlling that radar and moving these storms around, which they have the ability to do. So those are a few things that stuck out to me. Obviously, again, some of the headlines that news outlets like CNN have, they're starting to use terminology as well that I've never heard before. Evacuations begin in Florida as the state faces a major hurricane strike from Helene. And Helene's an interesting word as well, or name, I should say, with the word hell in there. Helene. It's not Helen, it's Helene, right? And a hurricane strike. It almost sounds like a strike. When you hear strike, right, like a pitcher throws a baseball strike, right? He's aiming for a certain spot. Or like when you hear a missile hit somewhere, they say strike, missile struck, missile strike, right? Almost like they're telling us that it's deliberately striking a target. So there's a lot of things that tell us that this is likely man-made. And at this point, with them pushing the climate agenda, obviously every single storm that we see is very likely to have these weird weather patterns, right? This one heading to Georgia. So it's veering west. Again, veering west. And Georgia is not a place that gets hit with major, major hurricanes. Now, they're saying right now it's a major hurricane. But if you look at maps of the history of hurricanes, right, you'll see what they tell us every single time or show us every single time is that these storms come and then they almost like a giant C, right? It comes up, it hits Florida, and then it goes off onto the East Coast almost every single time. But now that they're using weaponized weather more and more frequently, they don't want you to notice that the science they once told us doesn't exist anymore. They just chalk it up to climate change, right? That's why you'll see articles like this. The jet stream may be starting to shift in response to climate change. And this is from newscientist.com. Of course, I love how they call it New Scientist because it's new science. They're making it up as they go, right? Has anyone been paying attention? How all of a sudden, if you get injected with something, let's call it a magic potion, right? The whole purpose of it is to make you immune to something else. Well, new science tells you you're not going to be immune, but you still need to get it, right? You like how all of a sudden we can't identify what a man and a woman is based on chromosomes? You like how they tell you now new science tells us that men can have babies? Yeah, the same new science is now telling us conveniently that everything we've ever been told is changing, because conveniently there's this climate stuff happening that's going to end up enslaving us because it's about monitoring human activity, and the jet streams that we all once knew no longer exist. So this is obviously put out there for anybody who finds a video like this and starts saying to themselves, oh, wow, this is interesting. I never heard. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, here's an article for you to explain it away, right? Oh, well, there's a reason that there's a new jet stream. So don't be suspicious as to why the storm is coming up the Gulf of Florida, and instead of veering off into the Atlantic Ocean, it's literally turning left towards Georgia and then up into Tennessee, because this is not normal. It's normal for, not very normal, but it's normal for a hurricane to hit somewhere like Tennessee, but it would come up through Texas. They would come up through the south and veer off to the east. That's usually how they happen, right? So normally when Florida gets hit with a hurricane, it'll veer up to the Carolinas, sometimes even up the coast to Virginia, New Jersey, New York, and dispense off to sea. But here we have it just completely going inward. So obviously they strategically put these stories out there about the jet stream. And for anyone that doesn't know, I might as well mention it every single day, right? The U.S. patent applications that they have for hurricane and tornado control, all the documentaries that I've played in the past that show you them talking about having the ability to manipulate. So, in fact, let me play for you this clip, because some of you may never have seen this, from about 13 years ago, where they talk about this man who they were calling the hurricane tamer. You may have heard of him before. His name's Bill Gates. Yeah, he seems to have his hand involved in everything going on. And in fact, well, Bill Gates got involved with a patent that was going to help tame hurricanes. Now, 15 years later, these hurricanes haven't been getting tamer. They've been getting more intense. Isn't that a coinkydink, right? That Bill got his hand in this, and all these other nightmares have continued to happen year after year after year, whether it's Bill telling us that we all need to get inoculated, or it's Bill telling us that we have to do something about the climate while he's sucking carbon out of the air instead of planting more trees. And then, as you'll see in this clip, Bill's even planning back 15 years ago to use a fleet of ships to be able to steer weather away and dispense hurricanes. But it's crazy that he has a fleet of ships and the weather's actually getting worse, because you think Bill is actually trying to prevent hurricanes. He sure has his hand in a lot of quote unquote natural events that are occurring around the world, doesn't he? And he's also, of course, he's one of 13 inventors who has the patent filed for hurricane taming. Take a look.
When you hear the name Bill Gates, you probably think Microsoft founder, but now the billionaire may be known as the hurricane tamer. Gates is listed as one of 13 inventors on a patent filed for hurricane prevention methods. Hurricanes gain strength from condensation driven by warm surface water, which leads to greater wind speeds. Gates and his team plan to use a fleet of ships to cool warm surface water by mixing it with colder water from greater depths. They hope this will sap energy from growing storms, leading to weaker, less devastating hurricanes. The patent, which isn't expected to be approved for another 18 months, was submitted by C-REIT LLC, a sub-entity of an Intellectual Ventures and an invention acquisition and development firm.
So again, nobody's regulating these people. It's amazing. I just covered Bill in a recent video. I mean, he's getting rolled out now that the UN is in New York City, and Bill's talking about all these things that he's got his hand in, and he's still showing his face in public, even after getting smashed with that pie many years ago, because he hates humanity so much. So it's amazing that people don't realize, well, this guy was involved with Microsoft, but he has his hand involved with all this stuff with the climate and the weather, even a patent that's supposed to help weaken storms. So he's paying out of his pocket for a fleet of ships, but of course he's trying to weaken the storms, not increase it. At the same time, he's trying to tell everyone out there to get inoculated with something that doesn't make you immune nor cure you from a so-called disease. At the same time, he's sucking the carbon out of the air. At the same time, he's telling you he wants to block out the sun. At the same time, he's telling you it's time to accept artificial intelligence, telling you not to eat meat. I mean, can I go on and on for years about the things that Bill Gates is involved in? Because he's involved in every single one of them. And it's amazing that he still gets rolled out on television and these people applaud when he comes out. as if they're applauding an actual serial killer, which is what they're doing. So Hurricane Helene looks like it's going to potentially be pretty bad. And that opening clip that I showed you is also interesting to note that they had that huge wall built to prevent, to try to block out flooding and things like that ahead of time. Like they would put that kind of money into it, only knowing about this 3 or 4 days in advance. The entire thing is suspicious, but like I said, there's wording in there like hurricane strike, the movement of the storm, the fact that it's 400 miles wide and it's going to cover the entire state of Florida and then move westward, right? While they're telling you on the other side quietly that jet streams are no longer jet streams. They don't exist conveniently anymore because of the climate. So now the government could take these storms and direct them in the most bizarre patterns, and you're not supposed to be suspicious of it, despite your government having patents to manipulate the weather. Don't be suspicious when suddenly the weather just goes all over the place and makes a zigzag through the entire country because the jet streams have changed because climate change. Well, Bill Gates, of course, has a fleet of ships out to sea that are supposed to make the hurricanes less damaging. Whatever happened to that, Bill? I haven't seen the hurricanes get less damaging. In fact, they've gotten worse and worse and worse. And I believe that patent that he had came out before Katrina, or right around the same time. How convenient, right? So keep an eye on the storm. Pray for people who are in the line of fire because that's what they really are. They're in the line of fire. This is your government at work in 2024, and it's only going to get worse. And for people who go, why would they ever do that to us? Well, they're psychopaths. They're psychotic, satanic psychopaths. And their goal here is to start destroying people's lives with the weather because, of course, they can get away with it, right? If all these people just brought the military to the front, they'd have a war in their hands, and we would outnumber them. So they're using silent weapons for silent wars or quiet weapons for silent wars, right? Nobody would ever think that the government was doing this to their own civilians, even though our government has told us many times, from JFK to Lyndon B. Johnson, that the goal in the 40s and 50s was weather modification and weather control. Yet in 2024, we're supposed to believe when people can do all these things on their phone that the government doesn't have the ability to do that this is all just coincidentally happening in 2024 because the Earth's getting warmer or cooler or whatever narrative they spin, because they could change it every week and the majority of people aren't paying attention to it, right? But these psychopaths are obviously manipulating the weather and they're moving people around like cattle. Don't forget about FEMA buying up people's property in these flood zones. This is going to force people out of states. It's going to force people into zones, smart cities, etc., freedom cities, all being done deliberately while they want you to continue to pay attention to all the nonsense going on, all the theatrical political theater where they're working together to make you irate at your fellow citizen when the government is literally attacking you. I thank everybody for being here. Pray for everybody who's affected by this. Obviously, just because these things are man-made doesn't mean that they don't destroy lives. They destroy lives. So pray for people. Pray that God intervenes with their sinister, sadistic plans. I thank you guys again for being here. God bless all of you as always and your families.